Hi, I'm Rachel. Before I get into my story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to hear more about how I got through one of the hardest nights of my life, an experience that changed everything for me. Thanks for watching. That evening started out as a special occasion. It was supposed to be a celebration at Mrs. Raymond's fancy house. Everything looked perfect. The beautiful crystal chandeliers gave off a soft light, and the table was set with fancy dishes. It was meant to be a happy family dinner, or at least I thought so at the time. I was excited because I had some big news to share. I had recently gotten a promotion at work, which was a big step in my career in marketing. As I got ready for dinner, I remember smoothing out my dress, feeling a bit nervous but mostly happy, imagining how everyone would congratulate me. I took a deep breath, ready to share my achievement with the family. As we started eating appetizers, I leaned toward my husband, Elijah, and whispered, "I have great news." He nodded, encouraging me to go on. I then turned to the rest of the family and announced, "I've been promoted to senior marketing director." But instead of hearing cheers or applause, there was an uncomfortable silence. Mrs. Raymond, Elijah's mother, looked at me with narrowed eyes, her lips pressed into a tight line. She leaned over to Elijah and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "Is this what we raised him for? To be overshadowed by his wife's career." Elijah, who had always been supportive, suddenly seemed small and uncomfortable under his mother's glare. His smile disappeared, and he pulled his hand away from mine under the table. I tried to keep the mood positive, saying, "This is a great opportunity for us, Elijah. The raise is substantial." But before I could finish, Mrs. Raymond interrupted. Her voice was full of judgment as she said, "What about starting a family, Rachel? Do you think money can replace the joy of having children?" Elijah, to my shock, chimed in, his tone suddenly cold. "Yeah, Rachel. When are you planning to settle down? This career isn't everything." His words cut deep. It wasn't just what he said, but the way he said it. I felt betrayed. I looked at him, hurt, and said, "I thought you were proud of me." My voice trembled with emotion. As the main course arrived, the conversation shifted to other topics, but the tension didn't go away. It lingered in the air, much like the smell of the pot roast on our plates. Elijah's attitude became more hostile, his expressions matching his mother's disapproving frowns. When dessert was placed on the table, Elijah suddenly stood up. He threw his napkin down in frustration and said loudly, "You should know your place, Rachel. You're my wife, not my competitor." His voice echoed in the dining room, and I felt my world shatter. This night changed everything for me, and I'll never forget how it all unfolded. I stood up, my heart racing. "Being your wife doesn't mean I have to give up my dreams, Elijah," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I deserve respect, not this." Before I could say anything else, something happened that I still see in my nightmares. Elijah, in a sudden flash of anger, raised his hand and slapped me across the face. The sharp sound of the slap echoed through the room, immediately silencing everyone. I put my hand on my cheek, frozen in shock, as pain spread across my face. Every pair of eyes at the dinner table stared at us in disbelief, but no one said a word. Without speaking, I slowly pushed my chair back, the legs scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. My mind was spinning, but I kept my movement steady. I walked toward the foyer, the sound of my heels on the marble floor echoing like a steady drumbeat, signaling my escape. I grabbed my purse and didn't bother to look back. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The door closed behind me with a soft click, marking the end of one chapter in my life and the start of a new, uncertain one. In that moment, I knew my marriage was over. I had to leave and find a place where I could be myself, where my ambitions weren't seen as something wrong. I needed space to breathe, to rediscover who I was after spending so much time in someone else's shadow. As I drove away from the house, it grew smaller in my rearview mirror. I felt a strange mix of emotions, fear and relief. I was alone, really alone for the first time in a long time. But along with that loneliness came a new feeling, one that was fierce and bright. It was the feeling of freedom. I didn't know where my journey would take me, but for the first time, I was ready to find out. The next morning, I woke up in my small, sunlit apartment. It felt like the beginning of a new life. The events of the previous night seemed far away, yet still painfully fresh in my mind. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, asking if the rumors they'd heard were true. They were worried and confused, but I ignored the messages. I had more important things to focus on. The first thing I did was call a divorce lawyer. "I need to file for divorce," I said firmly, when the call connected. "It's urgent." "I understand," the lawyer replied. "I'll get the paperwork ready. Can you come in this afternoon to go over the details?" "Yes, I'll be there," I responded. After hanging up, I felt a small sense of victory. There was no turning back now. At work, I tried to stay focused, but my mind was somewhere else. My boss, Mr. Bradley, noticed my distraction. "Is everything okay, Rachel?" he asked gently. I just nodded, knowing that things were far from okay, but also knowing that I was taking the first steps toward a better, stronger version of myself. "I'm dealing with some personal issues, but I'll manage." "Thank you," I told my boss. He gave me a thoughtful look. "If you need time off, just let me know." "No, I'd rather keep busy." "Thanks," I said, offering a small smile. He nodded, understanding. "Well, if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." I was grateful for his support and immediately buried myself in my work. The familiar tasks were a great distraction, helping me focus on something other than the chaos in my personal life. My colleagues were kind, and their support made it a little easier to breathe. Later, Megan, one of my closest friends at work, approached me. "I heard about what happened last night. Are you okay, Rachel?" I sighed. "It's been tough, Megan, but I'll get through it." She smiled softly and said, "You're stronger than you think. And if you need a place to crash or just want to hang out, my door is always open." "Thanks, Megan. I might take you up on that sometime," I replied, feeling a little lighter, knowing I wasn't alone. "Drinks after work?" "My treat," she offered with a smile, trying to lift my spirits. That evening, we went out for drinks. Over a couple of hours, Megan and I talked about everything. Despite the mess that was my marriage, I found comfort in moments of laughter. For just a little while, I could forget about everything and feel normal again. When I got back to my apartment, I checked my phone. There were several missed calls from Elijah. I sat on the couch, staring at the screen, unsure if I should call him back. After a moment, I decided against it and sent him a simple text. "I filed for divorce. Please respect my space during this time." His reply came almost instantly. "Can we talk about this?" "Please, Rachel, I didn't mean." I took a deep breath and responded, "I need space, Elijah. Good night." As I put my phone down, a wave of mixed emotions hit me. I felt sadness, anger, relief, and a growing sense of determination. I was free now, or at least on the path to freedom. I looked around my apartment, small but cozy, and felt a sense of peace wash over me. This was my space, my safe place. No one here could hurt me. I thought about Elijah, about how his choices, influenced by his mother's toxic views, had led us here. He had pushed away the person who stood by him all these years, and now he was alone. It was sad, really, but it wasn't my problem anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving, I was starting to live. I was stepping into a new phase of my life, one where I could be myself without fear. Tomorrow, I'd be stronger, and the day after that, even more so. This was just the beginning of my journey, and I was ready for whatever came next. As my career continued to grow, I knew that so would I. As time went on, I became more involved in bigger, more meaningful marketing campaigns. My career was growing, and I started to connect with important people in the industry. I led webinars, taught workshops, and shared my knowledge, which helped me build a solid reputation as a leader. I felt proud of the progress I was making in my career, and things seemed to be heading in the right direction. One busy Tuesday morning, I was going through some campaign proposals when my phone buzzed. It was a call from Andrea, a well-known person in the marketing world. "Rachel, I've heard about what you've been going through, and I'm really sorry to hear about it," Andrea said, her voice both kind and professional. "Thanks, Andrea. It's been tough, but I'm doing okay," I replied. "I've been thinking," Andrea continued, There's a spot open for a speaker at a conference next month. The topic is resilience and leadership, and I think your story, both from a personal and professional point of view, would really connect with the audience. What do you think? Her offer surprised me, but I knew it was an amazing opportunity. I'd be honored, Andrea. Thank you for thinking of me, I said, feeling both excited and a little nervous. As my career kept growing, word about Elijah's behavior started to spread too. People who once admired him were now whispering about what had happened. During an industry event, I overheard 3 executives talking about him. He's looking for work again, one said quietly. After what he did to Rachel, who would want to hire him? The other replied, shaking his head. While I was thriving in my career, Elijah was struggling. His professional life was falling apart, and he couldn't seem to find a way back. He reached out to me a few times, trying to fix things. One afternoon, I received a text from him asking if we could meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. When we met, Elijah's voice was soft and full of regret.
Rachel, I'm sorry.
I was wrong, he said, looking down at his hands. I've lost so much. I can't find work anywhere. It feels like every door is shut. I listened but kept my guard up. Elijah, I can't go back and change the past. You made choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. Can't you help me? Maybe talk to people, tell them I've changed, he asked, his voice hopeful. I shook my head. It's not just about what I say anymore, Elijah. People know what happened. It's out there. This is about the choices you made. Leaving the cafe, I felt a mix of pity and determination. Elijah was learning a tough lesson about respect and consequences, one that he had brought upon himself. Back at work, I threw myself into my projects with even more energy. My experiences, both the painful and the empowering, had shaped me into a stronger person. It was a bittersweet truth, but sometimes our personal struggles can lead to professional success. Through it all, I realized that these challenges had made me more resilient and more ready to face whatever came next in life. As I looked toward new projects and opportunities, I felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that I had made the right choices for myself. I had built a path that aligned with my values and my vision for the future. With the finalization of my divorce, it was like I could finally breathe again after what felt like an eternity of holding my breath. This new chapter in my life wasn't just about moving on. It was about taking all the lessons I had learned and using them to build a stronger, better future. At work, my role grew beyond the usual day-to-day tasks. I decided to start a mentorship program for young women in marketing, inspired by my own experiences of overcoming challenges. It was during one of these mentorship sessions that I met Cheryl, a smart and determined intern who reminded me a lot of myself when I was starting out. One day, during our session, Cheryl looked at me, full of curiosity, her notebook ready to take notes. Rachel, how do you deal with criticism, especially from people who think you don't belong? She asked. I smiled at her and said, you listen to it, learn from it, and then let your work speak for itself. Never let someone else's doubts become your reality. Instead, use it as motivation to push yourself harder. Cheryl nodded and quickly jotted down what I said. And what if things get really hard? She asked. I leaned forward and replied, that's when you reach out for help. Lean on your network, find mentors, and never be afraid to ask for support. We're stronger together. The mentorship program became one of the most rewarding parts of my life. But it wasn't the only thing that was going well. My social circle grew, too. I was often invited to speak at industry events and gatherings, where I shared my story and experiences. At one of these events, a networking dinner for marketing professionals, I ran into Randy, a former colleague who had heard about my recent accomplishments. Rachel, I just wanted to say your talk was really inspiring, Randy said, clearly impressed. How do you keep moving forward after everything you've been through? I smiled, accepting his kind words. It's about not letting your past define your future. Every challenge is just another stepping stone to something greater. Our conversation soon shifted from casual to something more serious. We started discussing potential collaborations, and Randy asked, have you ever thought about writing a book? Your story could inspire so many people. His suggestion surprised me, but it also excited me. By the end of the night, I had exchanged contact information with a publisher who was also at the event. It seemed like every conversation was opening new doors, showing just how far I had come. As my personal and professional growth continued, so did my confidence. I was no longer just trying to survive, I was thriving. The future was full of possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all. I became deeply involved in hosting workshops, leading marketing campaigns, and becoming a voice for resilience and empowerment within the marketing world. Every time I spoke at an event or led a workshop, it felt like I was not only sharing my knowledge, but also healing from my past experiences. I was turning the pain I had endured into valuable lessons for others, helping them on their own journeys. After a long day filled with back-to-back events, I would often lie in bed reflecting on how much my life had changed. I was no longer that woman who sat silently at the dinner table, suffering without a voice. Now I was a leader, a mentor, and a survivor. I had taken the challenges I faced and transformed them into triumphs. This wasn't just a new chapter of my life. It was a vibrant and fulfilling continuation of a journey I was proud to call my own. As the months passed, the painful memories of my past with Elijah began to fade. They were like faint echoes, barely noticeable compared to the exciting, vibrant life I was now living. I had come so far, but sometimes the past has a way of creeping back into our lives. One afternoon, during a casual coffee meetup with a mutual friend, Martha, those old memories briefly resurfaced. "Rachel, Elijah's been asking about you," Martha said cautiously. "He's really struggling and says he regrets everything." I sipped my coffee, thinking carefully about her words before responding. "People often regret their choices when they start to feel the consequences of their actions," I said calmly. "He wants to talk to you, maybe apologize," she continued. "It seems like he's really sorry, Rachel." I looked at Martha and replied, "I appreciate you telling me, but that part of my life is over. I've moved on." My words were firm, leaving no room for doubt. Martha nodded, sensing that I wasn't interested in reopening old wounds. We quickly changed the subject, leaving Elijah's regrets behind, right where they belonged in the past. Despite Elijah's attempts to reach out through text messages and phone calls, I remained firm in my decision. I didn't respond, not out of anger, but out of a need to protect my own well-being. My journey had taught me the importance of setting boundaries and respecting myself. Responding to Elijah would have reopened doors I had long since closed. In the months that followed, my career continued to flourish. I spoke at conferences, led innovative marketing campaigns, and watched with pride as my mentorship program for young women in marketing grew. The impact I was making felt meaningful and real. My story, which I shared on different platforms and in workshops, connected with many people. It became a source of hope and inspiration for others going through their own struggles. One evening, as I reflected on the past year, I realized just how much I had transformed. I wasn't just someone who had survived difficult times, I had thrived and grown stronger because of them. My journey wasn't about getting through a tough situation. It was about rising above it and creating a life full of purpose and passion. I had learned that resilience wasn't just about bouncing back. It was about learning, growing, and building something better out of the challenges life throws at you. Looking back, I was proud of who I had become and even more excited for the future that lay ahead. This was just the beginning, and I was ready to continue this journey with strength and confidence, knowing that I could handle whatever came next. I had built a life filled with success and meaning. Knowing that Elijah regretted his choices didn't bring me satisfaction, but it reminded me of the consequences of disrespecting and undermining others. As I closed my journal, which was full of my plans and thoughts, I felt a deep sense of peace. My past with Elijah had sparked my journey of growth and achievement. My victory wasn't in his failure, but in my own rise. It came from my decision to turn pain into strength and to live a life based on my values and dreams. This story isn't about his downfall, but about my determination to thrive. As we wrap up this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Rachel was right in cutting Elijah out of her life completely? Share your thoughts below. And if you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.